Melanie, we only had a couple of minutes yesterday, and I appreciate you coming back on today on the podcast and the radio broadcast. Melanie is with the Times of London. She's a columnist there. She's also the author of The Builder's Stone. And we were talking about the battle with Islamism last night. Thank you for coming on, Melanie.
My pleasure. Good to speak to you again, Glenn.
So, explain first, for anybody who doesn't understand, the difference between a Muslim and an Islamist.
Well, there are people who say there is no difference, that Islam is one thing and that all Muslims are equally bad. And I personally have used the term Islamism and have found it very helpful because I think that there are plenty of Muslims, certainly in Britain and elsewhere, who are absolutely fine, who have completely signed up to Western values. That's indeed why they have chosen to live in the West. They appreciate the freedoms of democracy and equality of women and so forth. But there's a very large number in the Muslim community in Britain and around the West, elsewhere in the West, which is not fine. These are what I would call Islamists, or people who are of the view that Islam is a political project, which means that they have to impose Islam on the non-Islamic and not Islamic enough by their lights world. And those are the people who are presenting the problem, which we are grappling with. But I do think it's important to make a distinction between the two.
So the Islamist is somebody, I would compare them to a communist or a fascist, a Nazi, that it is their way or the highway, and their goal is to spread this ideology and make everybody uniform all around the world. Is that too harsh of a comparison?
That's right. No, that is absolutely right. They divide the world into the realm of Islam, which is everything good, and it's the realm of God, in their view, and the realm of the infidel, the realm of non-Islam, where everything is bad and everything is of the devil. And the terrible thing is that this is a doctrine of religious fanaticism. They believe they have a literally sacred duty, a God-imposed duty to convert the entire world to Islam. And consequently, these are people with whom you cannot negotiate. One of the problems of the West has been that it views these people, like everybody else in the world, through the prism of the West. They think that people in the West think that people in the Islamic world are all like them, governed by reason and self-interest. They really can't get their heads around in the West the idea that religious fanaticism is something completely different, that when Islamic suicide bombers blow themselves to smithereens, they're not doing so from despair, which is what the West thinks. The West thinks, why on earth would they do that if they weren't in despair? On the contrary, they're doing it because they are ecstatic that they are doing the work of God. People also believe in the West, why would Islamists want to hurt us in America, in Britain? We've done nothing to hurt them. That's not the way it works. The Islamist thinks that it's their sacred duty to convert everybody at the point of at the end of a ton of explosives to Islam. It's nothing to do with what the West has done to them. It is how they see their sacred religious duty in the world. That's the terrifying thing, which so many in the West, I think, just don't really appreciate.
Well, let me play devil's advocate here and say what everybody in the media would say to you. Well, there are religious extremists, that are Christians as well, and they're just as dangerous, Melanie, and you know it.
No, they're not as dangerous. There are religious extremists who are Christians, and some of them resort to violent acts. But they don't have the view that the entire world has to be dominated by their point of view, and they are not setting out to dominate the world. And even if they are, in their own minds, they are a tiny fringe. We're dealing with the world, in the world of Islam, although, as I've said, we must be very careful not to tar all Muslims with the same brush. However, the dominant religious authorities in the world of Islam are all committed to this jihadi outlook, this belief that the non-Islamic world has to be converted to Islam. And that is the problem. You have a kind of institutional impetus behind this terrible thing, whereas extreme Christians, they appear, they do terrible things, but nevertheless, it's well within our ability to control this. When you're dealing with so many millions of people in the world of Islam who are out to destroy the free world, you're dealing with something completely different.
And isn't that why the countries, ours, yours, Europe, are remaining silent and instead silencing those who are speaking up and speaking the truth? I mean, what's happening in England with the silencing of free speech is terrifying.
Yes, I think it's certainly a large part of it. I mean, I have followed this for many years, the supine attitude of the governing class in Britain to what I would call the steady process of Islamization, which has been going on. And I think there is more than one reason for that. Certainly, a principal reason is fear, because the numbers are so great. In absolute terms, the numbers who are posing a direct threat to Britain are enormous. The security service says that of the thousands of people on its books as a direct threat to Britain, although Muslims comprise something like, according to official figures, something like 6% of the population of Britain, the security service, MI5, says they compose 90% of those who are posing such a serious threat that they're on their books. So this is a terrible problem for sure. And it's one that, in terms of numbers, has spooked successive governments so that they run away from it. But there's another reason why successive governments have run away from it, which is that the liberal world, by which I mean not just people who are like the Labour Party, which is in government now, but also the Conservative Party that preceded it, they've all signed up to the overarching kind of default liberal position that the West cannot assert its superiority over any other culture. To do so is racist. And therefore, you cannot criticize the world of Islam because that is racist, or, to use the other phrase, Islamophobic. In other words, it's a kind of prejudice or bigotry to criticize a minority group, one that is held to have been oppressed, in inverted commas, by the West for centuries. And consequently, it's paralyzed because it cannot bring itself to even name what it's up against, because it tells itself that to say there is this very serious and unique problem in the Muslim community in Britain, in the Islamic world in general, that is a form of racism and Islamophobia. And so the most it will agree to is that there are a few crazies in that world. And it then tries to explain those away in the most, it would be comical were it not so dangerous. It says, when it comes to Islamic extremism, well, there's nothing Islamic about it. It's just extremism, as if it sort of arrives out of a clear blue sky.
Right.
It's ludicrous by any standards, but these are the tangles that they're getting themselves into.
Hi, Melody. My name's Jason. I'm one of Glenn's researchers, and I've been fascinated, I guess horrified, by watching some of this, and also just the fact that you cannot speak about any of this. You're immediately shut down. In America, we have groups that are partnering with the left, groups like the Council on American Islamic Relations. Do you have something similar over in the UK that's playing that role of pressuring people, pressuring lawmakers to where you will go this way, or you will not say things like no-go zones, or there will be legal ramifications? Well,
we don't have something exactly parallel to CARE, but we have Muslim Brotherhood-funded groups, of which...
That's close enough.
Something called the Muslim Council of Britain, which the British Home Office, the sort of security-based government department, has treated with a great deal of caution and disdain. I think it has refused to negotiate or talk to it. I'm not sure whether that is still the case. But there is a vast number of charities which are basically Muslim Brotherhood charities, which aren't touched because the government refuses to ban the Muslim Brotherhood, and I think this applies to America as well. They refuse to ban the Muslim Brotherhood, partly because it's very difficult to get hold of it, as it were, because it's a secretive organization that hides behind apparently legitimate charities and voluntary groups. But nevertheless, it is very much there. The people in those groups adhere to the teachings of the foundational characters of modern-day Islamism, political Islam, jihadi Islam. And there are a number of people in Britain who have said for years, people are very well informed about this, who said for years that Britain should outlaw the Muslim Brotherhood. It's absolutely essential to stop it from proselytizing, as it is, from radicalizing so many impressionable young Muslims. And I think that's true of America too. I mean, CARE is regarded as a kind of legitimate partner by successive administrations in various respects. Now, this is all disastrous, and that really has to stop.
Okay, let me take a 1 minute break and then come back with you, Melanie. And I want to ask you, how close to the edge are we? I fear that we are getting to a place to where we're so complacent that we're going to lose, and you first, lose our rights to speak out against this. And then, that's going to sow trouble on the streets. And eventually what happened to Iran just happens. How does a great society that is Western and open and educated all of a sudden, start putting their women in burqas? It happened before, and it looks like it's happening to Europe and England and could happen here in America. What do we do to stop it? You're hearing Melanie Phillips. She's a broadcaster on radio and TV, gives public presentations all across the English-speaking world. She also writes a weekly column for the Times of London and has written a book called The Builder's Stone. Welcome back, Melanie. How close to the edge is, let's just say, England to real civil unrest or a possible 1979 Iran kind of thing? Do you see that in the cards at all? I think
there's still sufficient people in Britain who are authentically British, who have a sense of authentic British culture, which is a culture which has never resorted to violence unless its back is absolutely against the wall. It's pretty tolerant, it's pretty mild, and it prefers to deal with stuff through the democratic process. And I think that's kind of playing out now. Certainly when you say, how close are we in general, I think that the West, that Europe in general is extremely close to being submerged by all this, and so is Britain. If you just look at the demographic projections, I forget now quite by which year, but basically in the next few decades, various countries are going to have very, very significant Muslim minorities or even a Muslim majority. So that is clearly, a difficulty. Things could be done, and I have some hopes that things will be done because although the elites, the political and cultural elites, have their heads firmly turned the other direction, nevertheless, we've seen the rise of so-called populist parties in Britain and Europe, which are parties, whether you like them or not is not the issue. Some of them are pretty obnoxious, but basically they're responding to the fact that millions and millions of ordinary, decent people who want to live in a place that they feel is their homeland, they feel a connection to their nation, they want to feel pride in their nation, they want to feel that their nation's historic values are being upheld with people who share that common purpose. Those people have felt completely abandoned and betrayed by the entire political establishment. So we're seeing the rise of populists. And I think, therefore, through the democratic process, we're going to see the election of people who are going to be much more robust. Now, what could they do? There are things they could do, because the Islamists have made the inroads they have because they have correctly perceived there is a vacuum. It's not happened so much in America, but in Britain in particular has been the sort of Western world leader in being post-moral, post-religious. Britain is godless by and large. The church, unlike in America, has not maintained a defense against the erosion of biblical-based morality. It has led the charge against it, amazing as that may seem. And so if you have a vacuum and you have a society which tells itself it was born in the original sins of racism and colonialism, it won't defend itself, and it's open for conquest. So there are various things that the West could do to defend itself.
Melanie, I'm out of time. Thank you so much for talking to us again today. You're a real beacon of light and courage, and I wish there were many more people like you. Melanie Phillips,